Log analysis is one of the key skills that you need to become a SOC analyst. It is the heart of your role to interpret data to help paint a story, to understand what had occurred on a certain asset. This video is going to be quite fun as we will dig into a web server log together, and I will show you how I extract the data using Linux commands to try and determine what had happened. Let's get started. Let's head over to blueteamlabs.online, which is their cyber range, and then you want to create an account if you haven't already. Once you have an account, you want to select the challenges tab, and then you want to scroll down over to search by name and then type in WordPress. The one that we're interested in today is called log analysis compromised WordPress. Go ahead and select start challenge. And here is the scenario. One of our WordPress sites has been compromised, but we're currently unsure how. The primary hypothesis is that an installed plugin was vulnerable to a remote code execution vulnerability, which gave an attacker access to the underlying operating system of the server. For those that don't know, a remote code execution vulnerability will allow an attacker to execute code on the target system, which could either reveal sensitive information or perform unauthorized actions. To get started, we will go and download the file, and then we can extract it using the password BTLO, all lowercase. However, for analysis, I will be using Ubuntu 22.04 Server Edition, but you can use any operating system you like, such as Kali Linux or Windows, to view these log files, but just be sure to use a virtual machine. To unzip the file, I'll go ahead and use the unzip command and then point it towards the target of interest, which is called wordpress.zip. And then the password again is BTLO, all lowercase. Now we should have our log file named access.log. Let's type in ls and we have it there. The first thing I want to do is take a look at the first and last event, as I would like to know what the time frame for this log is. Now we can do this by typing in head access.log. Now I do apologize in advance, this does look very messy because we are using quite a small screen here. But essentially, the head command will show us the first 10 events found in this log. We can see that the first event recorded in this log was on January 12th, 2021 at 15:52:41 at UTC time. And it had the source IP of 172.21.0.1. Now we can take a look at the last event. And by doing that, I'll clear out the screen and then I'll type in tail access.log and hit enter. This will show us the last 10 events found in this log file. As we can see here, the last event is 14th of January 2021 at 7:46:52 a.m. UTC time. And again, we see the source IP of 172.21.0.1. That is a little under 2 days worth of data. Now we have the time range for this log file. The reason I'm doing this is because if I was handed a log file and was asked to investigate a particular event that occurred on, let's say, January 15th, if you did this check, you can quickly tell the person who provided this log to you that it only goes up to January 14th. This could potentially save you a lot of time in the future. The next thing I want to know is if there are any other IPs associated with this log, specifically looking in the source IP field. So far, I only saw one, which was 172.21.0.1, and there are multiple ways that we can obtain this data, but I'll use the cut command. So let's go ahead and clear this out, and then I'll type in cat access.log. I'll pipe it into cut command -d. -d is for the delimiter, and then I'll type in a single quote, space, and a single quote, as this will delimit using a space. And then I'll type in -f1 to select the first field. So let's go ahead and hit enter and see what happens. This will show me the first column or the first field of this data. Next, we'll sort it out and do some deduplication. In order to do that, I'll press the up arrow to replay that command and then press space. Let's do another pipe. I'll type in sort to sort the data. pipe it into unique because I want to deduplicate everything using -c for the count. And then I will pipe it again using sort-nr. This will show us the top hits in the beginning. So if I were to scroll all the way up here, we can see at the very top, there are 1,035 hits for the IP address of 172.21.0.1. However, we do see some fields that are not IP addresses, such as this Thursday, SH. But before we dig into these IPs, let's go ahead and output this into a file called ips.txt. To do that, I'll clear out the screen again, go back into the command, and then I'll do a greater than sign, and then type in ips.txt, and then hit enter. This will output all of the contents into a file called ips.txt. If I were to type in ls, I can see that there's a file called ips.txt. Let's go ahead and cat it out. And we can see the results here. Perfect. Now we can do a little bit of analysis. Let's scroll all the way up, and I see that the second IP has 249 hits, which is the IP of 119.241.22.121. Now I have some questions about this. What is this IP doing? What activity is associated with this IP? And before we get into that, let's continue to take a look at other activity that might help me with this investigation. For all we know, this IP might be legitimate and we may be going down a rabbit hole. Another field that we can check for a quick win is the user agent. So let's try and grab all of the user agents that exist in this log. We can do this by using the same cut command, but it will be a lot of trial and error, which is fine. So I'll clear out the screen and then let's run another head command on this log. Type in head access.log and hit enter. We are essentially trying to find the user agent, where in this example, this seems to be the user agent here, Mozilla /5.0. We see that the user agent is surrounded by quotation marks, so that is likely a pretty good candidate to use as a delimiter. Then let's go ahead and try and use that. I'll cat out the access.log, and then let's do a cut -d, and then I'll point it to a quotation mark as a delimiter, -F1 to select the first field, and then I'll hit enter. So far so good. I mean, we do get some data, so let's go ahead and try field 2. And we do see a GET request and the URL, but still no user agent. To save some time, it is actually field 6. Now we can go ahead and sort and unique this file, similar to what we've done before. So I'll do a sort unique -c to count it, and then sort -nr. And immediately we do notice that there are some fields that has a bracket with a date in it, and that is not a user agent. So let's go ahead and try and remove those. To remove it, I am going to just do another cut command. And if we take a look at the field, it is starting with a bracket, with a square bracket. So I'll use that as a delimiter. And then I'll select field 1 again. And this time it seems a lot more cleaner. So let's go ahead and run the sort command again with the unique and sort. And that does seem a lot better. Let's go ahead and output this to a file called useragents.txt. So again, greater than sign, useragents.txt. Let's clear out the screen, do an ls, and we see a new file called useragents.txt. Let's go ahead and cat out the user agents. And now we see some data. Immediately, I do see an interesting user agent, which is SQL map, WPS scan, which is a WordPress scanner, and then some Python requests. That is something we should take a note of to then dig deeper into these user agents. Scrolling up, we can take a look at the top hit, and that is a Mozilla /5.0 on Linux, and the second hit is iPhone. If this is not spoofed, then that's quite interesting. I mean, we can tell that somebody is using an iPhone to access this web server. So to quickly recap, we have two files now. We have an IP file and we also have a user agent file. When looking at web traffic, I am always interested in traffic that have a post request, because post requests are requests that send data to the server. So let's go and check those out next. To do that, we can run a command called grep. Grep is essentially a command that you can use to find specific text or patterns in a log. So I'll just type in grep and then I'll surround it with post because I'm interested in finding post requests, and I'll point it over to our access.log. Now looking at the results, we can see that the text is highlighted in red. So these are all of the post requests that happened in this log file. And I do see some interesting IPs, so 103.69.55.212. Then I also noticed that there are a lot of 403 errors. So in HTTP, 403 simply means that these are forbidden errors. So what I'm going to do next is add another grep, but exclude all of the 403 errors. To do that, I'll rerun the grep post command, and then I'll type in grep-v. This will tell grep to exclude a string or a pattern, and then I'll type in 403. Now I should no longer see any 403 statuses. And again, I know that this is very, very messy. So let's go and look for only the source IPs and make it a little more cleaner. To filter for only source IPs, again, I'm going to rerun the cut command with a delimiter of a space, and then I'll select the first field and hit enter. Now we see a bunch of IPs. The next step is to run the sort command, and now unique it, count it, and then sort it again. And now we see that the top IP is our internal IP of 172.21.0.1. Now I don't really care too much about this yet, but do take note of the second IP address, 103.69.55.212. This could be an IP of interest. Before we run some OSINT on it, let's go ahead and output these results to a file called postips.txt. I'll rerun the command, use the greater than, and then type in postips.txt. I'll clear out the screen, type in ls, and now we have 3 files that we've created: ips.txt, post IPs, and user agents. So let's cat out the post IPs again. And now we can do some OSINT on the second IP address, this external IP of 103.69.55.212. So using abuse IPDB, it shows no reports, and this IP is located in the country of Taiwan with an ISP of qwoo.co.limited. Let's go and check out VirusTotal. VirusTotal shows this as clean. The next step that we can do is let's check the activity from this IP address in our logs. So let's filter specifically for that IP. Before I do that, can you guess what the command I'll be using to filter for that IP? If you said grep, you're absolutely correct. So I'll type in grep, and then I'll type in the IP address, or at least paste it in, point it to our access.log file. Now, I do see something kind of strange. It might pop out to you as well, but I'm going to highlight it right here. So there is a post request with a suspicious PHP file called freak.php, spelled FR34K. Let's scroll up to the beginning. Now it did zoom out just a little bit because there is just a bunch of data, but by scrolling up to the beginning, if we recall the scenario, it mentioned something about a potential vulnerable plugin. And with the third entry, we see that it performed a GET request to a plugin called contact-form-7. Perhaps this could be our vulnerable plugin, or it could be this plugin over here called simple-file-list. What we can do is quickly run a Google search for these plugins and see if there are any vulnerabilities tied to it. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'll type in contact-form-7 vulnerability. And we can see that there's a LinkedIn post talking about a WordPress plugin vulnerability. So I'll click on that. And it has a CVE of 2020-35-489. I'll take note of this just in case. And reading more about the vulnerability, an unrestricted file upload vulnerability has been found in contact form 7 on versions 5.3.1 and older. Okay, what about simple file list? Let's go back and then search up simple-file-list. And I see one exploit under exploit-db for the version 4.2.2. Let's go ahead and click on that. So this is for an arbitrary file upload for this plugin of simple file list. Scrolling down, we see Okay, we see the code on how to exploit this vulnerability, and we see that it's also a pre-authenticated remote code execution. Nice. Let's head back over to our terminal. I want to take a look at all of the post requests again, but this time we'll filter for contact form and simple file list. So let's clear out the screen, and then I'll type in grep-post access.log, and I'll pipe in grep. This time I'll type in -i. This will ignore case sensitivity, and I will look for contact, and then hit enter. And this is all of the traffic related to our contact-form-7 plugin. And if you recall, the vulnerability was all about file uploads. So I want to find out if there were any file uploads towards this plugin. And to find that out, we simply look at the URL that was posted. Now, if we take a look, we see that here, there's no indication of any files. If we look at the other ones, we see that there's contact forms for feedback, and it seems that they're all feedback related. So it doesn't appear to be any file uploads for this plugin. So maybe the simple file list was exploited. Let's go ahead and check out and filter for our simple file list. I'll just remove the contact, and this time I'll just type in simple and hit enter. So now we got a bunch of other events for simple file list. And scrolling up, we do see a freak.php, and it is under uploads. So it is likely that this plugin was the one that was exploited. We also see that there's another IP address of 119.241.22.121 poking around with this plugin. We see that there are a couple post requests as well. And it's using a Python request user agent. So some kind of automated activity maybe. Let's check out what activities are associated with the IP address of 119.241.22.121. And also do put this in your notes. To do that, I'll grep that IP, access.log, and then I'll hit enter. So we do see a bunch of events, but let's start at the very top. And the first event was on January 14th, 2021 at 5:42:34 a.m. And we do see it interacting with the plugin contact-form-7, as well as the plugin simple-file-list. And if we were to scroll down, let's see what else activity was associated with this IP address. So it seems to be crawling of some sort, right? It's doing a lot of GET requests and is doing some funky business over here. Scrolling down. Ooh, look at that. So there's a lot of GET requests for accounts. So this activity does seem to be some sort of crawling activity using an iPhone. Now, this user agent could obviously be spoofed, and that's something to keep in mind. While I was scrolling down, I did notice something interesting here. We see a post request for a logon for itsec-hb-token equals admin login. This occurred on January 14th, 2021 at 5:54:14. Perhaps this IP had identified a token that grants them access. Now, scrolling down, we do see a user agent of WPS scan. If you recall, we did see that user agent when we were doing our filters, and it seems that this IP was responsible for that log entry. If we scroll down at 6:26:53, we see a post request made by this external IP address. And immediately afterwards, we noticed a freak.png file. This is something to take note of because I believe with the exploit itself, if I understand it correctly, it will automatically rename .png to .php. Let's perform some quick OSINT on this IP address. Looking at abuse IPDB, it has 0 reports, and this IP appears to be located in Japan, and the ISP being Big Lobe Incorporated. What about virus total? What does that tell us about this IP here? So there are no security vendors that flag this IP address as malicious. Back to our terminal, out of curiosity, let's check when these plugins were installed or activated. I'll clear out this screen, type in grep-i for ignoring case sensitivity, type in contact form-7, point it to our access.log, and then let's scroll all the way up. And actually, the first event, we see that there is a GET request and the action equals activate. So it appears that this plugin was activated back on January 12th, 2021 at 15:57:07. All right, next let's check out simple file list. I'll remove the contact form, type in simple-file-list. And then we'll head all the way up. And again, the first event, we see a get request and the action equals activate. This occurred on January 12th, 2021 at 15:56:41. Now I think is a good time to recap our findings. On January 12th at 15:56:41 UTC time, the plugin contact-form-7 was activated. Shortly after, at 15:57:07, another plugin, simple-file-list, was activated. Both plugins have a remote code execution vulnerability, allowing attackers to upload malicious files to execute on the server. Versions 5.3.1 and below for contact-form-7 is vulnerable, whereas versions 4.2.2 and below for simple file list. The first observed activity from an external IP was on January 14th at 5:42:34 AM UTC from the IP address of 119.241.22.121. Based on open source intelligence, this IP address is located in Japan and it appeared to be interacting with both plugins, along with crawling the file path on the web server of 172.21.0.3. About 12 minutes later, this IP was seen to have successfully identified a token named admin login. At 6:01:41 AM UTC, the same IP was seen using a tool called WPS Scan, which is a WordPress scanner to identify potential vulnerabilities. At 6:08:31, another external IP of 103.69.55.212, which is located in Taiwan, was seen crawling for plugins. At 6:26:53, the IP address of 119.241.22.121 was seen exploiting the vulnerable plugin Simple File List by uploading a file named freak.png, which would automatically be renamed to freak.php. A couple seconds later, the PHP file freak.php was requested by the IP address of 103.69.55.212. The last observed activity for the IP of 119.241.22.121 was on January 14th at 6:26:53 UTC time, whereas the IP of 103.69.55.212 was on January 14th at 6:30:11 AM UTC time. The total duration was 47 minutes and 37 seconds. With this recap, I think we have enough information to try and complete the questions now. Starting with the first question, identify the URI with the admin login panel that the attacker gained access to. Now we know this based on our finding, which was the admin login. So again, I'll head back over to the terminal. The IP address of 119 was the one that found that token. So we actually just grep for the admin login. We see that the full URI is the following: wp-login.php itsec-hb-token equals admin login. So that is the one I pasted here, and I'll hit submit. Can you find the two tools the attacker used? Well, to find that, let's take a look at the user agent, right? We'll just cat out the user agents and then look at the bottom. Now, arguably, there are 3 tools here, but because it is only asking for 2, I'll be using the WP scan and SQL map, simply because these are actual tools built for a certain purpose. I mean, you can also use Python, which is the 3rd tool, but again, I'll just use these 2. So I'll type in WPS scan and SQL map. The third question, the attacker tried to exploit a vulnerability in contact form 7. What CVE was the plugin vulnerable to? Do some research. When we Googled this plugin for vulnerabilities, we did identify a CVE that was provided to us. And what we can do is head back over and type in contact form-7 vulnerability. Go back to the LinkedIn blog here, and then I'll just copy the CVE here. And that seems to be correct. Nice. What plugin was exploited to get access? Now we did search both plugins, contact form, and the simple file list. We didn't see any file uploads on contact, but we did see file uploads for the simple file list. Now it does say with the format, the plugin name here and x.x.x. I'm assuming that is the version number. So I'm going to enter simple file list, and the version that was vulnerable, take a look here, simple-file-list, and this one here, I believe. So 4.2.2, 4.2.2, and that's correct. Cool. What is the name of the PHP web shell file? We did see a PHP file called freak.php. Now we can take a look at this by going over to our terminal, and then we can grep for the freak.php file under access.log, and this was uploaded to our simple file list. So I'll click on submit, and that is correct. What was the HTTP response code provided when the web shell was accessed for the final time? Ooh, okay. Let's go back to our terminal, and since we already grepped for the PHP, we can just take a look at the last entry, which is this one here. And they wanted to know the response code. And we see it is 404. Heading back over, we'll type in 404, hit submit, and perfect. Log analysis is something that you as a SOC analyst will do every single day. However, you might not be using grep or terminal command lines. Instead, you will likely be utilizing a SIM to query for this data. But nonetheless, it is always good to learn how to extract data using the command line, especially if you want to move on to a IR role down the road. Because, well, not everybody is going to have a SIM or an EDR, and you might only get access to a log file, such as the one that we just investigated. And that is it for the video. I hope you learned something new. If you enjoyed it, let me know by hitting that like button and subscribe if you want to. Remember to stay curious and do things differently.